QSBS is stands for Qualified Small Business Stock. It's section 1202 in the Internal Revenue Code. And essentially, this is the government rewarding business owners and founders. It's saying, hey, you guys took the risk to start a business, build a business. And SMBs are the backbone of America's economy. You created jobs, deliver valuable service. So to reward you for taking that risk, when you sell, you can get now $15 million or more in capital gains free. So it's a huge incentive. There are very few things in the tax code that completely eliminate taxes. Most tax tricks just defer taxes to a later date. But this completely eliminates the tax liability. So it's huge, and it can be $15 million or more in gain. So it's dollar quantum is pretty large too. So let's first set the basis for the rules. Not every business qualifies for QSBS. So first of all, you have to be in a qualifying industry. And so what doesn't qualify? Like hotels, restaurants, banking, insurance, mining and extraction. Those businesses do not qualify for QSBS. Second, you have to hold it for a certain amount of time. And third, you have to be a C-Corp. And fourth, the value of the business has to be less than a certain threshold. And so what changed in the most recent, one big beautiful bill is it made QSBS more accessible in two ways. One is, before it had to be a business smaller than $15 million in value, but they raised that to be $75 million. So now, even if you raised a good amount of capital or you're already a scaled business, as long as you're below $75 million in value, you can potentially take advantage of QSBS. But I think the second and more important change is the time frame, because let's say a business has been around for a while, they're an S-Corp. S-Corp doesn't qualify for QSBS. So you would have to convert to a C-Corp to take advantage of QSBS. Now, the big downside is that clock, that what used to be a 5-year clock, only starts after you convert it. So even though you've been running your business for, say, 15, 20 years, now you have to start the clock from today for 5 years. After you convert to a C-Corp, and then 5 years, and then you finally benefit. And it's a cliff vesting, so until you get to 5 years, you have zero benefit. What the big, beautiful bill did was it phased in the benefits. So after 3 years, you get 50% capital gains exclusion. After 4 years, you get 75%. And after 5 years, same thing, you get 100% capital gains exclusion on $15 million or more. So that's a big change, because I think if someone has been running their business for 15, 20 years, and we say, well, if you convert to a C-Corp now, 5 years from now, you might save a lot of taxes. That just feels too distant. And people will just kind of forego it because they really want to exit in 2 to 3 years. Now, if you get 50% exclusion in 3 years, it starts to make sense, because even if it's just 50% exclusion, that can still be millions of dollars in tax liability for a business that's less than 75 million in value. So that was another. I think that's the most important change. And there's actually a third change, where before it was the basis was 10 million, but now the base elimination has gone up to 15 million. So actually gives people more exclusion. I think again the time frame makes a big difference. I think nowadays people can exit a business certainly in less than 5 years, whether it's a tech startup or someone who's acquiring a business through entrepreneurship, through acquisitions. Um, you know, businesses can sell in less than 5 years. So now it's making QSBS accessible to even those businesses when the M&A timeframe from inception to close has been truncated to a shorter time period. So I think that's a big game changer, in addition to the fact that now, even at the most base level, instead of 10 million, people get 15 million. And for those companies that want to take advantage of it a little bit later, it's when you expand it from a 15 million cap to a 75 million cap, now a lot more companies can take advantage of it. So really, like, these small tweaks allowed a lot more business owners, founders, and investors to take advantage of QSBS. And as I mentioned, there are a lot of business owners, especially outside the Bay Area, that are not in tech startups. In my experience, didn't even know what QSBS was. They didn't know what it was. And then when they looked into it, because they are a S Corp or an LLC, they could not take advantage of it. And that was a big deterrent to them. And now with a 3-year phase-in period, it makes it a lot more accessible. And even those guys can now get at least some kind of partial tax exclusion. For like I said, like a 5-year horizon just feels too distant. And when we tell people, hey, this is a great tool, but only if you're going to think about selling in 5 years, then it's very easy to dismiss it or exclude 50% of their gains after 3 years. 3 years actually seems pretty close because, time flies by, and a lot of people are thinking when they approach us, we want to sell in 2 to 3 years. And we all know that when we plan for something to be in 2 to 3 years, it might end up being 3 to 4 years. So now you're in the strike zone, and suddenly the option value of doing this upfront work starts to make sense. So I think that's why this kind of tiered gain exclusion really gives business owners to plan ahead and take advantage of this, even if it's just through option value. I would say a founder can save millions even in the old QSBS rules, only now it makes it easier. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's say today there's a company that's doing 10 million revenue with 1.5 million in EBITDA. Let's say this business sells at 8 times, so that's a $12 million value. 5 years from now, this business can grow to 20 million revenue and slightly better margins, so 3.5 million EBITDA. And now it's a bigger company, it's going to trade at 10 times. So it's going to value is 35 million. Now, if this business, traditional S Corp, LLC, has no QSBS, then, well, the owner's going to pay taxes on $35 million. And between federal and state, that probably means somewhere between 12 and a half for someone in California. Now, if today they said, I'm going to convert this at a 2.5 million conversion valuation, then this business would get 10x that conversion value. So one of the provisions of QSBS is you get the greater of $15 million or 10x your basis. So if we say for illustrative purposes, the basis is 2.5, then you get 25 million of gains excluded. So you have to pay taxes on the first 2.5 because that was your basis. Then you get 10x that capital gains excluded. And so you only pay the taxes on the excess of 7.5 million. So instead of paying taxes on 35, you're only paying taxes on $10 million. And there are other ways to slice and dice the QSBS and structure it so that you would get exclusion on all 35. So that's really the beauty of QSBS. And now what the new rule says, the old rules would say, after you convert it, you have to wait a full 5 years. But the new rule says, okay, if you waited 5 years, you will get 25 million excluded. But if you only wait 3 years, you would get half of that. So you would get 12.5 million excluded. Still a lot better than paying taxes on 35 million. If you only pay taxes on 22 million. So that's the benefit there. So I think it's important for companies kind of map out their future course, look at what they're gonna do in the next 3 to 5 years. And then, if they are starting to think about an exit, think about what does it mean if I exit today? What does it mean if I exit in 2, 3 years? What does it mean if I exit in 4 or 5 years? I think it's a little bit daunting if you've been running a business for 15, 20 years, 25 years, and you just have to kind of keep running it with no end in sight. But what I found is when owners, founders, CEOs, they have a clear 5-year plan and they understand what the incremental value and tax savings are of that 5-year plan, it kind of puts a little bit more structure and motivation to execute along that plan. Because there's an end in sight. There's an end in sight. There's a clear goal. And that kind of allows people to plan for an exit. And they can see if I wait 3 years, if I work 3, 4 more years, this is how my value would grow, but this is also how much I would save in taxes. And it keeps us getting better and better. And then they can work towards a sale with that plan in mind. I think before the math was, hey, if you're a million EBITDA company today and you sell, let's say at 7 times, you're worth 7 million. And then now if your EBITDA grows to 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, you keep growing over 5 years and the multiple changes. This is what it means to sell. And it was a one-dimensional metric where if you work a little bit harder and grow the business, then the value of the business might go up a little bit and you'll have a slightly bigger exit. Now it's become two-dimensional in the sense that as time goes by, you can grow the value of the company, but you're also reducing taxes as it grows. And so oftentimes we would kind of do that analysis with our client so they understand if they think about the after-tax proceeds, the delta starts to become much bigger. Whereas, a lot of companies have been around for like 20 plus years, and it's not like they're growing super fast. They're not like VC-backed startups. So the notion of work for another 5 years growing at, 3, 5, 6% per year is not very exciting. The difference in 3 years can be a couple $1,000,000. And the difference in 5 years can be even more. Now it starts to move the needle, and now it starts to make a big difference. I would kind of like separate out the VC-backed startups versus owner-operated businesses. I think in general, owner-operated businesses are not familiar with QSBS, whereas VC-backed companies are familiar with QSBS, and they understand that. I think for owner-operated businesses, as I mentioned before, they are often structured as S-Corps. So when I talk about QSBS, then I'm going to share one more slide. I always kind of preemptively address the pushback they're going to get. Because they hear about QSBS, it sounds great. They go to their CPA. You kind of bear in mind, the CPA is not really an M&A advisor, but they go to their CPA for anything related to taxes. And the first thing they'll say is, oh, you're not eligible for QSBS because you're not an LLC or an S-Corp. And then they just give up there because they're, in their mind, the CPA, who's their tax expert, said that they can't take advantage of it. But that's not really true because there's ways to convert the LLC or S-Corp to a C-Corp to take advantage of the QSBS. So all problems are solvable. Second, the CPA says, oh, but C-Corp is not good for you because you would incur double taxation. You get taxed as a C-Corp and you have to pay taxes for yourself. Like C-Corp is not good for small businesses. And again, the CPA files your taxes, doesn't really do structuring work. So there's ways to structure your corporate entity so you don't pay double taxation. and you can reduce that leakage. And then we were talking about this earlier. A lot of times people say private equity firms don't buy C-Corps, or private equity firms don't do stock purchases. And this is a little bit of correlation versus causation problem. Now, if you walk into a room that's a bunch of owner-operated businesses and you ask them, how many of you are an LLC and S-Corp? 90% will raise their hand. If you ask how many of you are C-Corps, then very few are, if any, are going to be C-Corps. So now if you go ask and say, hey, private equity firm, how many C-Corps have you bought? They might say they bought none or very little, unless they're in like the software sector. So then one can say, oh, private equity doesn't buy any C-Corps. But that's because the starting base, everyone was an LLC or S-Corp. I would say in real experience, plenty of private equity firms buy C-Corps. And most software companies, because they are VC-backed, are structured as C-Corps because VCs want to take advantage of QSBS. So it's 100% doable. I think they're often asking the wrong questions. And then lastly, when people say, well, I can't wait 5 years, two things. Well, now with the big, beautiful bill, you don't have to wait 5 years. You can wait 3 years and get 50% exclusion. But on top of that, if there's another business, they could do a 1045 rollover, almost like a 1031 exchange in real estate. They can do a 1045 rollover. So there are, I think, because a lot of people are not familiar with QSBS, and when someone kind of throws that at them, there are like probably 5-10 reasons to not do QSBS. But the reality is you need, again, it kind of goes back to what we want to be as a firm is a problem solver. You have to solve each of those problems to get to a point where the client can take advantage of this great tool. It's helpful to talk to experts. It's a very complex topic. It's very nuanced. And, I've talked to a lot of CPAs, enrolled agents, tax lawyers about this. And look, the reality is not every CPA really understands qualified small business stock. Not every tax lawyer deals with qualified small business stock. And certainly not every M&A advisor deals with C-Corps and qualified small business stock. And so even when I interact with tax advisors, I specifically seek out the tax people at these firms that understand Section 1202. And usually those people are like the head of tax at Witham, or they do specifically these transactions at BDO. I would say they are like top of their game because there just aren't as many. It's QSBS is a relatively new thing, and as we pointed out, there aren't as many of those transactions, and so you got to be like a real tax nerd brainiac to dive into this. If you're like a high volume, I like to process many tax returns per year, you're not going to waste your time on QSBS. So I think it's important to find the right expert that actually understands this. I don't want the expert that's going to go ChatGPT this and try to talk to their client about it. So I think that's important. And I would say also, because it is a complex and nuanced topic, it's important to kind of figure out how you overcome the obstacles to find a solution. So it's worth millions of dollars. And think about how much time and effort you would have to put into sales and marketing to get millions of dollars worth of value. Millions of dollars of value don't just come off the bat like that. You have to put in the time and effort to figure it out, figure out the obstacles, create the right structured solution for your business so that you can take advantage of it. When I first learned about QSBS a few years ago, I would go around telling everyone about it because I thought it was it was next best thing since sliced bread. I told everyone about it. A lot of people got excited. They say we'd do it. And then about a year later, I checked in with them, like, oh, did you do it? And 100%, none of them did it. I was like, why? They're, oh, I talked to my CPA, but blah, blah, blah. For all these reasons, I can't do it. Oh, I talked to my lawyers, but he said it probably doesn't apply to me. And so that's when I realized there's a big gap between the business owner and a tax expert. Not to mention, you probably need a tax expert, a corporate lawyer, and a tax lawyer to kind of bring this all together to make it work. Also, for those that are thinking further down the line, they want to make sure that whoever sells their business is going to take advantage of QSBS. Because if you set up everything up for QSBS, but then you sell it in a way that doesn't qualify, then it's just a waste of time and money. And so we realized that as a firm, it's not enough to just tell people about it and tell them to go do it. That's like the equivalent of an health expert saying, I'm going to help you become healthier. You know what you do? You should eat more vegetables, eat more healthy, and make sure you work out frequently. Anyone can say that. That doesn't work. And how many people actually eat healthier and work out? So we've taken a much more proactive role where we kind of like quarterback the project of helping companies get set up. At this point, we know the experts for CPAs and tax lawyers that understand this. They're going to bring that team together, help our client implement QSBS in a time-efficient manner so that when they do sell 3 to 5 years from now, they will be able to maximize the benefit of that.